Hey, everybody! Happy Labor Day, first of all. Solidarity with all the workers of the world. And welcome to the show. Thanks for coming. As always, if you are with us in the live chat and you have questions or something you want me to see or talk about, especially if you were planning on being generous with a super chat this evening or this morning or whatever time it is, wherever the hell you are, please hold on to them until I get through with the patron questions because I always do those first. So just hang on to all your live chat questions and whatever if you want me to see something, because when I'm doing the patron questions, I usually don't pay strict attention to the live chat. So speaking of patron questions, let's get started, shall we? With the first question from a Patreon patron. It is from our very own Some Random Geek, who is, as always, with us in the live chat. And for his question this time, Geek says, I felt the need to re-educate your audience again on this subject, especially when they're talking to a leftist, someone who is entirely anti-capitalist, like a socialist, communist, or an anarchist. Personal property, the stuff you own and use, like your toothbrush, your VHS copy of Clueless, your home or apartment. You use it. It is yours. Private property, stuff you own and don't use, but charge rent to others for the privilege of using that land or house, or for the rights of using a river for fishing. Yes, that is a thing. Indigenous folks have to seek asylum in the U.S. fleeing Honduras because of the river being owned by someone else. Private property is also owning factories and companies while dozens or hundreds of employees work for you in those factories and companies for a wage that can never equal to the value of your labor. That way, the owner of the factory can make profits. Leftists are against private property because it is only the rich that can own multiple houses, companies, factories. That gives them far more power over everyone else. If the toothbrush factory is owned by the workers, like a co-op or socialism, the workers will decide to fire up the machine to make toothbrushes according to need as opposed to making profits, or repurpose the factories and machines for a different need, like ventilators, if possible. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. More to come. Now on to my actual question. You mentioned in the Patreon hangout that you watched The Naked Gun recently and still enjoy it like you did when you first saw it. Have you seen the short-lived TV show Police Squad that was the precursor of the Naked Gun movies? Hence why the first movie had the subtitle of From the Files of Police Squad. They have some hilarious sketches in that show. Check it out. I have seen Police Squad. I have not seen it for many years. I did not... Actually, I've looked for it online a couple of times, and I haven't been able to find it streaming anywhere. So I have not watched Police Squad for a long time. But yes, for those of you who don't know, Police Squad was a very short-lived TV series. I think they only did like 6 episodes, didn't they? It was a very short-lived show. It was one of those shows that was just a little bit before its time. People on TV, I guess, just weren't ready to embrace a show like that. It was just a bit too weird and absurdist. But it was basically like a half an hour airplane movie every week, or a half an hour Naked Gun movie, because eventually they made the Naked Gun movies based on it. But it was inspired by and made by a lot of the same people who did Airplane, and it's hysterical. I mean, it kills me. It's so funny. And so I have seen Police Squad, but it's been a very, very long time. But yeah, I watched The Naked Gun last week, and like I said during our patron hangout, I mean, I was laughing like a tickled baby the whole time. It was so funny. The presence of O.J. Simpson is always a little weird given where his life went later on. But if you can compartmentalize and get past that, it's such a great movie. It's such a funny movie. So yes, and I have definitely seen Police Squad. It's hilarious. Next question is from Andrew Michael. Good evening, Mr. Shives. Hope you're staying safe and healthy. There's a scene at the end of one of TNG's better two-parters. After finding out many humanoid species are related to each other, Picard is lamenting that the progenitor race's message of unity and peace fell on deaf ears. Then the Romulan commander calls him up and gives him a ray of hope for a peaceful future with the Federation's oldest rival. It was a beautiful scene, and I bloody love it. There's loads of scenes like that one. Another great one is Data's put down on Worf in Gambit, where he says, "I'm sorry if I have ended our friendship. I almost tear up every time." DS9, of course, was basically one great scene for 7 years. So this is going to be a tricky one. What would be your favorite scenes from the whole franchise? God damn that. You're right. That is a tricky one. Well, I like all the scenes you mentioned. Would be on my list. Speaking of Data, there's the scene from, I think it's uh, the Wounded. I think it's, no, not the Wounded. It's oh, it's no, I think it's from one of the episodes. It's the episode where they they're throwing the net, right? They're casting the net to catch a ship, to catch like a cloaked ship that is trying to pass through, Federation territory, like undetected, and they give Data temporary command of another ship, as a part of this fleet. And Data's first officer is this human guy who is like totally racist against androids. And eventually it builds to this point where Data just has to yell at this guy on the bridge in front of everybody. And you see like a glimmer of like, he's not angry because he can't feel that emotion, but he is mimicking anger, and he's being very like stern with the guy and speaking in a very forceful, clipped, like very serious manner. And you just never see Data that way. And that's a great scene when it's like, Mr. Hobson, execute my orders or I will relieve you of duty. And it's like, shit, Data's not fucking with this guy anymore. So that was a great one. Picard and Gul Madred in Chain of Command, when Madred tells the story about his childhood when he was a little boy starving to death on the streets, and Picard turns that around on him and he says, when I look at you now, I won't see a proud, strong Cardassian warrior. All I'll see is a scared little child who's starving on the streets. And isn't it amazing that in spite of all the pain you've inflicted on me, I still find you a pitiable man? And oh, it's such a great scene. And then in the same episode, Chain of Command, back on the Enterprise, when Jellicoe and Riker have that scene together where Riker has been relieved of duty for being insubordinate to Jellicoe, but then Jellicoe has to go ask Riker to fly the shuttlecraft for this crucial mission to lay mines to stop the Cardassian fleet, and he has to go and try to convince Riker to do this, and they have this great conversation back and forth. These two guys who just don't like each other and don't see things in the same way at all. And Jellicoe says, I'm not going to order you to do this. And Riker gets that big shit-eating Riker grin on his face. And he says, then ask me. It's so great. So I like that scene. From classic Trek, I love the scene on Vulcan in Amok Time. And no surprise to anybody who's heard me talk about classic Trek, Amok Time is my favorite classic Trek episode. And the scene where Kirk and Spock are fighting at the end of Amok Time, and specifically when they take a break and McCoy goes up to Kirk in the middle of the fight, and Spock has just been walking the fucking dog on Kirk. Like, he has just beaten Kirk's ass this whole fight. And Kirk is on the ground and he's huffing and puffing. And McCoy goes up to him and he says, "You're going to have to kill him, Jim." And Kirk goes, "Kill Spock? It's not what I came to Vulcan for, is it?" It's just, I love that. So those are some possibilities for my favorite scenes in the franchise. But and Deep Space Nine, good luck. How can you pick a favorite scene from Deep Space Nine? But those are the scenes from the franchise that like immediately come to my mind when someone says, what are some of your favorite Star Trek scenes? Danny K says, "Hi, Steve. I'm curious as to whether or not you have ever considered seeking public office. Even at the local levels of city or county government, more progressive voices would probably go a long way toward the goal of more openness to progressive policies on a national level. Thank you very much, and I hope you and your family are staying safe and healthy. P.S. I recently got into a Star Trek podcast called Treks and the City. It's quite good, and I'd recommend giving it a listen if you're not already familiar. P.P.S. Have you watched the DS9 episode Babel since this whole thing started? Nobody is washing their hands. Nobody is observing social distancing. It's a total shit show." And I just saw that I forgot to go back and pick up Dr. Babylon's fucking question. Okay, so I'm not familiar with Treks in the City, so I will check that out. Thank you for the recommendation. And no, I've never seriously considered seeking elected office at any level. I personally don't think that I would be a very good elected official. I suppose I would do a better job than some, but that doesn't that doesn't strike me as an area where I am best suited to contribute. I think a lot of one of the secrets of figuring out, how to lead a happy, productive life is figuring out where your skills are most needed, and where you can contribute most efficiently or most successfully. And I do not think being an elected official at any level, at the local level, the state level, the county level, whatever, would would be where I belong. But I agree with you completely that we do need more progressive people at the local level and the county level. And I think your reasoning is sound. I'm just not the guy. So I know I've never seriously considered it. And I just went to my Patreon page and checked. Dr. Babylon has not updated his question, so I am not going to answer that. It would be really great if you would just post your question. Not to be like a jerk about it, because I think you're a great guy and I really like answering your questions and I'm glad you're a patron. But like, if you don't have a question right at the moment when you are posting the content, just post it later, because that's really irritating. And apparently you forgot too, because there's no question there, so I can't answer it. So anyway, let's move on then to Tom McDonald, who says, "Hi Steve, how do I love thee? Can you count the ways? Really? Because I recently hit my head on no need to get into my kinks here, and you said this was a no judgment zone, but anyway, my head injury, yeah, and so I've forgotten the ways. Do you remember? Was it 4 or 5? It was something like that. It was 5 or it was a relatively low number, like on the scale of the universe, but in terms of like ways of loving people, I cannot like enumerate them though. I can't tell you exactly what each one is, Tom. I'm sorry. I think it was like you love me 3 or 4 different ways. It's like you love me as a friend, you love me as a YouTuber, you love the beard, you love the hat, and I remember specifically you said that you thought the hat was a very, very sharp, sophisticated look, and you hoped that I never took it off on camera, and that's why I rarely ever do. That's for you. You said that specifically, Tom. So that's why I do. That's why I maintain this look so rigidly, to honor your request, and because I know that you like it so much. So I can't remember all of it, but I know that was in there somewhere. Anyway. Good luck healing the head injury. Hope you feel better soon. Next question. General Contact Unit Problem Child says, why do so many liberals think they can get leftists to vote for Biden by browbeating and shaming them? So I'm a fan of most of the Puzzle in a Thunderstorm shows, but every time the election comes up, they get really mad and start talking down to and scolding anyone who'd even consider not voting for Biden. Like in the last episode of The Skeptocrat, Eli went on a cringe elitist rant about how the socialists are just as ideologically rigid as Republicans and don't know anything about political science if they think there's anything to accelerationism, right after he said he blames Green voters for Trump. It's not like they didn't also include rational arguments for voting Biden, but do they really think people are going to want to hear rational arguments from people who've just told them they're morally reprehensible morons? They say their position is the most rational and pragmatic, but they don't seem to be being particularly rational or pragmatic about convincing others to adopt it. P.S. Okay, so I rewatched you trying to say Moray Zillar correctly after I tried to write it phonetically for you, i.e. Moray Zillar. I realized I didn't get across that you're supposed to draw out and emphasize I and bit of Zillar. So maybe I should have written it more like Moray Zillar. Moray Zillar. Is that closer? Is that closer? Moray Zillar. I swear to God, it's the name I've had the most trouble pronouncing after having people correct it for me that I can remember. So I apologize if I'm continuing to fuck up the pronunciation of that name. Moray Zillar. Zillar. Moray Zillar. Moray Zillar. This is riveting television, isn't it? Just watching a clueless dipshit try in vain to correctly pronounce one person's name. That's what I'm here for, folks. Anyway, I agree with what you're saying. I think, here's the thing. I can relate to, and I didn't hear that show. I still have not heard Eli's actual rant. I've just heard seen you describe it. So I take your word that you're describing it accurately. I can relate to what I think Eli is saying on a personal level. I too feel a great sense of frustration with people who are at this stage who are contemplating not voting for Biden for reasons other than the sexual assault. And I feel, and it sucks that the Democrats nominated someone with a credible sexual assault allegation, because I have to throw this in every time I mention this and say I completely support anyone who says I cannot vote for Biden because I cannot vote for someone who I believe has committed sexual assault against someone. So I completely, I totally respect that, and I do not think anybody should try to pressure you or shame you into changing your mind or whatever. That's fucked up, and it's irresponsible and it's disrespectful. If people don't want to vote for Biden because they just can't get past the fact that he has been credibly accused of sexual assault, it's not my job or my desire to try and argue someone. If someone says I can't vote for a rapist, it's not my job to say, can you though, and try to argue them into it. That's just a really shitty thing to do, and I'm not going to do that. But for people who are saying they might not vote for Biden for political reasons, because they don't think he is progressive enough, because they don't think he is a good candidate in terms of policy, I relate a lot to the frustration that I take it was being expressed in the rant that you're talking about that Eli did. I think he and I probably agree on that. But I probably would think twice about going off on a rant like that myself in public for the reasons that you describe in your question, because I don't think it would accomplish anything. I don't think you would convince anyone to vote for Biden by going off on a rant and saying that, well, you just don't know anything about politics, or, you're a dipshit, you're a fool, it's your fault that Trump was elected. I think that would be counterproductive. I think that would be showing disrespect to someone who, in theory, I would still like to vote for Biden. I want Biden to get all the votes he can get, because the best case scenario at this point is that he wins the election. So I want as many people to vote for him as possible. And if you are someone who is on the fence about that, and you can see your way between now and November to voting for him, I don't want to do anything that will jeopardize that. So even though I personally can relate to Eli's frustration, I would not choose to vent that or to share that on my show, because I just think that's counterproductive. I'm sure all the other people who share my frustration would be happy to hear it and would say, yes, I'm glad somebody said something. It is frustrating. But I don't think that would help our cause. I mean, I think in the case of leftists and progressive people and progressive leaning people who are considering voting for Biden, but or who could potentially vote for him, but just aren't there yet, that is a group that I think we should be trying to win over, or at least hoping that they see their way through to voting for Biden. So I don't want to alienate them. I don't want to push them further away. Right? People who are voting for Trump, I mean, to hell with them. I'm not reaching out to them at all. But people who may potentially vote for Biden, I have no interest in trying to push those people away, even if it would be really cathartic for me to vent my personal emotional frustrations over, like, what does it take? You know what I mean? Like, how bad does Trump have to be before you will agree to vote for the alternative, even if the alternative is also in his own way very, very shitty. So I'm not going to do that. So that's where I think Eli and I would part company on that. Not that I would necessarily disagree with the emotion behind what he was saying or the frustration that he's feeling, but taking like a really argumentative, condescending, disrespectful tone toward people that we might actually need to vote for the guy, I would not want to do that. So next question is from Eric Allen, who says, all right, Steve, riddle me this. Why doesn't the Federation have more ground bases on other planets? We always see HQ in San Francisco, which is fine, but I don't recall ever seeing a Federation base on Andoria, Teller Prime, or even Vulcan. Every time the Federation is in jeopardy, it's some enemy threatening Earth. Why can't those other damn planets face an imminent threat from the Borg or Romulans or whomever? Why do we have to bear the burden of attack from a Federation enemy? And why does every major threat seem to cut through our outer solar system defenses like butter? Anyway, I just think the Federation should have more than one major ground base. It's like the original XCOM game. If you only create one base, and if the aliens capture it, game over. But if there are other major ground bases, let's get some stories from those places. Well, yeah, I mean, the reason why it seems that way is because I guess the writers of Star Trek have this idea that if Earth is in jeopardy, then we, the audience, being from Earth ourselves, will invest in it a lot more. We'll be a lot more likely to care about it because, like, uh-oh, the Borg are going to assimilate Earth. Oh, no. So I think that's why the attacks on the Federation always end up kind of coming through Earth. But I mean, there are star bases. There are Federation bases on other planets. It's a good point that you say, well, we've never seen one on Tellar Prime or on Andoria or on Vulcan. That's true as far as I can remember, but there have been star bases on other planets, and it's a confusing name. For some reason, when they were coming up with all the jargon for Star Trek, they decided that that Federation outposts on planets would be called star bases. But there are also orbital star bases, so it's confusing. Like sometimes they'll say, oh, we're going to Starbase 515, and they'll cut to the exterior shot, and it's this location like on a planet, like a military base. And then sometimes it'll be in orbit. So it's confusing. Sometimes a star base is in space, and sometimes it's on a planet, but they're called star bases. So yeah, but there are ground bases on other planets besides Earth. It's just that Earth always ends up taking the brunt of the attacks because drama, basically. Next question is from David Colby. I'm writing a Star Trek ripoff. The basic premise is that rather than first contact with aliens, our high-tech surveillance systems detect that vampires, werewolves, and other magical creatures. The main character, Tiffany Winters, vampire hunter, is the latest in a long line of magically empowered vampire hunters who was frozen in 1998 by vampires and shot into space. So she gets found by a spaceship in the 24th century and is unfrozen to learn that humans, vampires, werewolves, and the rest are now in a peaceful space anarcho-communist Federation deal. So, actually, it's a specific Star Trek TNG episode, The Neutral Zone, crossed with Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I'm throwing in as many obscure Star Trek references and gags as I can. Got any you want me to chuck in? It doesn't matter how obscure or tangential, I can do it. I have the technology. We'll throw in a $6 Million Man reference, too, while you're at it. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but that is a great idea. I love just the that flip, that turn of you introduce the idea of a Buffy the Vampire Slayer type character, this ancient generational warrior who has been endowed from birth and generation after generation of the family line to fight evil in the form of vampires and werewolves, etc. And then she gets, fried like from Futurama, wakes up in the future, and it turns out all the beings that she has been sworn to destroy are now getting along, and they're part of this, cooperative government or whatever. That's such a great idea. But no, I can't think of any specific Star Trek reference that I would want to see. I mean, there's always the idea that if you could come up with some sort of analog for the Remans from Star Trek Nemesis, because they kind of looked like they looked like Nosferatu type vampires, like crossed with Klingons anyway. So if you want to throw some kind of nod to them, your own version of those into the story, maybe that would be neat. But yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but that's just such a great idea for a story, man. It's such a great idea. Isaiah Taylor, I like dark humor. It makes me feel good, along with a good dosage of satire. So, let's talk about me going to hell. If I die in some foreign land serving my country, let's go ahead and talk about me possibly dying. I feel like I'm a waste of space, especially when I explain how I see the world. My views would benefit mankind, but it seems like people don't take me seriously. They call me childish and naive when I express my ideas. Is it bad for rich people to use poor people to fight their wars, to make sure people are treated fairly at work, fighting climate change and others? Would the world be a better place without me? My conservative friends say I'm always too negative, and if I'm going to war, well, we know how negative war can be. I got in a big fight with my Republican adopted mother the other week, and I accused her of wanting me to march off to the slaughter of war, and she wants me to conform to American patriotism. I don't think she realizes the gravity of my situation, and she just thinks that I'm raw material that needs to be molded. I feel abandoned, and no one wants to hear it. They want to baby other people with autism when I'm the one who pays my own bills and can hold down 2 jobs at once. They want to run to the fluffy people who get handed everything, while many others struggle for what they need. This was before COVID-19, and as I stated before, I feel slightly better. When I die, I want to go to hell. I have a hatred for God as much as the Irish have a hatred for the British. I was baptized and fire, and if hell is more accepting than heaven, then my life has been one hardship after another, and no one seems to care. Please don't worry about my health. I'm fine. I feel like some random geek's radical stuff is rubbing off on me, LOL. I love the earth and its people, but I don't know if they love me. Then again, maybe I need to love myself first. One of the saddest days, Mother's Day, is coming up, so I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist. I just hope in the next existence I don't make the same mistakes as I did in this one. Sorry for the rant, Steve. In a nutshell, I'm as majestic as the moon, yet as dead inside as its surface. One of the reasons why I want to be an astronaut is that I feel like I belong in space rather than on Earth. But as Worf told Riker, I know you will do the right thing. Well, I'm glad I could read that and share your troubles and your thoughts there, Isaiah. I mean, I don't know what I can do to cheer you up, but I like having you around. You know, I think you've been a really nice presence in our patron hangouts the last couple of times, and as I said last time when you talked about possibly joining the military, I mean, I wish you nothing but the best of luck in whatever happens to you, and I certainly don't want anything bad to happen to you. As for wanting to go to hell when you die, I can sort of relate to that. I mean, as an atheist, I don't believe there is a heaven or a hell. But I have said before, and I still believe this, if I thought that Christianity was true and that it was more or less as fundamentalist sort of, conservative Christians say it is, I would not want to go to that heaven either. I would not want to, I wouldn't, like I couldn't. I would be incapable of it. I could not worship that God, the sort of right-wing conservative Christian fundamentalist God. I could not serve that God. I am incapable of it. So I would go to hell too. So with me, it wouldn't necessarily be, with that particular religion, with that particular version of hell, like it wouldn't so much be me saying I would rather go to hell. It would be me saying I'm just going to hell. Like, that's just the way it is. There's no way there's no way I'm not going. So I can relate to that. And I hope like I said, I don't know what I can do to help you, but I hope you know that, I think it's nice having you around, and, I hope you feel better soon. Next question is from Shad Sterling, who says, it seems to me that part of the problem with the two-party system is that large parties necessarily become a power-keeping organization and typically fail to continue to pursue their purported values as their capacity gets taken up with power-keeping. I think we could make a better system by having only small issue-focused parties, which could form coalitions but not merge into large parties. Then every candidate could be a member of several parties, and that list could be a decent summary of their policy goals, which voters could use to compare candidates. Individual parties might be too small to nominate candidates, but a coalition of parties could endorse a candidate who is a member of every party in the coalition, and the coalitions could change from election to election, and any one party could change who they support at any time. I think this is more consistent with the democratic idea that government is less corrupt when power is more widely distributed, and I think that if the Republican Party had been a coalition of individual issue parties, many of them would have withdrawn support for Trump by now and may have rallied around another candidate for the 2020 election. It might be difficult to switch systems while we've got the two-party system built into so many of our election laws, but we might be able to get started just by establishing a bunch of local single-issue parties and making loud, if conflicting, endorsements for every election. I've been kicking this idea around for years now, and this may be the first time I've written it down. What do you think? Well, I think it's a really intriguing idea. I think it's, in a way, when I think about it, it's more compatible with our current system than other proposals for reforming the two-party system that I've seen, because it keeps political parties involved in the process, but it changes how they relate to candidates and how candidates relate to them in kind of a fundamental way. Like this idea that a candidate could and in that system almost certainly would be a member of multiple parties. Like that's a really intriguing idea to me, to change it from, because that way you kind of lose out on the sports team aspect of it. I mean, eventually you would still run the risk of, if then the coalition would become the party, and then the coalition would be the team instead of the party. That could still happen, and depending on how you look at it, that does happen. With different factions within the major parties. There are different factions within the Republican Party that for a long time it was thought of that they were sort of they had kind of an uneasy coexistence. There were the religious conservatives, and then there were the more moderate sort of fiscal conservatives, and they kind of put up with each other because they needed each other to win elections. But since Trump, it seems like everybody's okay with everybody. Like nobody has any principles at all. They just, if a Republican does it, they're okay with it. So apparently that wasn't the case. But yeah, I think it's an intriguing idea. It would still be tough to implement because of, there is still the sports team mentality where we're Democrats, they're Republicans, this is our team, that's their team. And if you try to tell people, okay, actually, we're going to try to radically alter what we think of as a political party. So now instead of a party that with an expansive, all-encompassing platform addressing many different issues, now each party will only address a couple of significant issues. And if you want to advocate for issues other than that, you have to join another party that focuses on those issues. I think that's a really neat idea, but it will just be very tough to implement. But in a way, I feel like easier to implement than some other more radical reforms that I've seen talked about. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting idea, and I thank you for sharing it with us. Neo-normie UPS man of the apocalypse. I recently rewatched all the prequel trilogy and original trilogy, along with Solo and Rogue One, as it all fits together as a beautiful tapestry. The sequel trilogy will be fully on Disney Plus in May, mainly due to poor sales on stream of the Rey movies. I really wish the sequels could be deleted, as they're not very good, and their biggest problem is they're empty vessels that add nothing to the mythos, and, nothing about the characters at all. And really, the most unforgivable thing for me is how Chewie and R2-D2 are pointless background characters now. I'm starting to watch The Mandalorian, and I'm interested in the news of the 400 years before the prequels, which seems to be the next phase of Star Wars, and that they will be connected to the Knights of the Old Republic with more godlike Jedis, dark Jedi, gray Force users, Bendu, and Sith, which is what I love about the expanded universe, or the 2D Clone Wars cartoon, and the epic Star Wars The Force Unleashed. My main question is, was the sequel trilogy unnecessary, and would it have made more sense if Rey was a clone, much like The Force Unleashed 2's plot, instead of the nonsensical plot they went with for Rise of Skywalker? Well, there's a couple things going on there. Yes, the sequel trilogy was unnecessary creatively, sure. I mean, the story, for all intents and purposes, had come to a satisfactory conclusion with Return of the Jedi. So yes, creatively speaking, I think you could make an argument that the sequel trilogy was unnecessary. And most sequels really are unnecessary because in most cases, the story has been completed in the first movie that the sequel is a sequel to. So yeah, sequels are usually unnecessary. The question is, does the sequel justify its existence? And that is, I think, where there's a lot of debate with the newer Star Wars movies. There are people, like you, for example, who would say that the sequel trilogy was not good enough on its own merit to creatively justify its existence. And that then encourages you to look at the sequel trilogy as more of a purely commercial exercise. And it's a commercial exercise no matter how you look at it. The reason the movies exist is because Disney knew it could make a ton of money by getting people to buy tickets to them and watch them. So that's why they exist. But if you don't care for them creatively, then you can view them more as purely commercial, and they start to seem very cynical, like, oh, they only made these movies to get Star Wars fans to fork over their cash. I think the sequel trilogy on the whole was pretty good. I think that the third movie I didn't dislike it as much as a lot of people did. I didn't think it was perfect. I didn't even think it was great. But I as I said in my review video, I think it worked for me by the end. Like I didn't walk out of the theater hating it. There are parts of it that I really didn't like, especially the directions they took the characters of Rey and Kylo. I just thought they could have gone much more interesting places than they ultimately went, and that was a disappointment. But overall, I didn't think it was terrible, and I feel like I find a lot of the negative comments toward it, from my perspective, to be greatly overblown. Like if you don't like it, that's your right. You cannot like it. That's fine. But it seems a bit overblown to talk about it as though it was some awful abomination that shouldn't exist. And I mean, it was a good if disappointing movie to me. That's my basic take on it. And I think the second one, The Last Jedi, is one of the best movies of the entire franchise. So that alone creatively justifies the sequel trilogy to me, because I think The Last Jedi is one of the best of the entire series. So to me, creatively, it does justify itself, even though it's very imperfect and has a lot of problems and made some creative missteps, and they made some decisions I wish they hadn't made. Do I think that it would have been better if Rey was a clone? Not really. And I'm not familiar with the expanded universe really very much at all, so I can't comment on any of that. If it would have been better if it was more like The Force Unleashed, or if it was more like Knights of the Old Republic, I'm not familiar with any of that. So I can't say. But I do wish that they had gone some maybe a little more bolder direction with Rey than they did. And specifically, I wish that they had not retconned Rey's parents being nobodies, because that was not only a great direction to take that character in The Last Jedi, but that scene where Kylo tells her, your parents were nobody, they were nothing, you come from nothing, you have no place in this story, is maybe my favorite scene in any Star Wars movie. So it was a little disappointing to see that sort of overwritten in Rise of Skywalker. But like I said, I'm rambling. I did not dislike the sequel trilogy nearly as much as a lot of other people did, and I thought the second one, Last Jedi, was actually really great. Andrew C. Hawkins, do you think that the Twitterati made Bernie Sanders seem more popular than he was, at least as a presidential candidate? I don't mean to disparage those who did donate, canvass, phone bank, and or text bank for the Sanders campaign. I myself cumulatively donated $100. It just seems to me that most of what goes on in left-wing social media is limited to social media, and people don't realize how much work these things entail. I once listened to labor organizer Jane McLevy talk about the stupendous amount of work she's done, and it made me feel pretty pathetic about my own attempt at workplace organizing. Yes, I do think that social media gave the impression that Bernie Sanders was more popular than he was. Absolutely. I think that is a completely accurate statement, and I think it has been borne out, unfortunately, it has been borne out by the results of 2 consecutive Democratic primary election seasons. Because in 2012 or 2016, he was up against an established candidate in Hillary Clinton, and I don't think nobody really ever expected him to win. But he made a pretty good run for it, and then eventually he lost and never really got that close to winning, but it seemed like he was going to give Hillary a pretty good run for it, and he did, relatively speaking. But then you could argue that this time coming in, he was he was one of the favorites, if not the favorite, and he was the last person standing before Biden eventually claimed the presumptive nomination. So he did well again, but he never really got all that close to winning the nomination. And I think a lot of the Bernie supporters who were sort of shell-shocked that he lost were overrating his popularity among the general electorate, because his online presence is so large and he is so popular online, and his supporters online are so ubiquitous. I mean, you just cannot get away from Bernie Sanders supporters online. They're everywhere, and they give the impression that he is this universally popular guy And how could he possibly lose the election? And it just doesn't, as it turns out, that just does not reflect reality. And I wish it did, because I think that Sanders would have been a better nominee than Biden. But that's just the way it is. So yes, I think that the Twitter sphere, the Twitterati, did inflate the actual popularity of Bernie Sanders. I think it did it last time, and I think it did it this time as well. Yeah, absolutely. John Burnsy, hey Steve, I'm living out of town with my mom and my sister's family. We're trying to keep my mom from dying of COVID. In Alberta, the numbers are interesting, to say the least. In Edmonton, the northernmost provincial capital in Canada, the infections are well less than 1,000, while Calgary has more than 3,000. I'm thinking it makes sense that if goods are being transported from Thunder Bay, Ontario, near the Canada-US border, to Vancouver, again near the US border, it makes sense to go through Calgary and not Edmonton. And less interactions, the cities are about the same population and have about the same urban sprawl, means less risk of infection. What do you think? Sounds good to me. I mean, I'm not really an expert on the routing of Canadian commerce, the transportation of goods and services throughout Canada, and what would be the best way to go through to minimize the effect on COVID. But yeah, it sounds good to me. So yeah, okay. It sounds reasonable to me. It sounds reasonable to me. But I am not really an expert on that. But yeah, the way you describe it sounds reasonable to me. Why am I showing you that? That's not where that's supposed to be. There we go. Have I not been doing this long enough? Anyway, back to the questions. Bruce Bardup says, hi, Steve. What is life? For example, is it wealth, power, fame? I think not. Maybe another piece of pie and another cup of coffee. Closer, but no cigar. A process of self-delusion, maintaining a mere superficial appearance of being well-balanced while you cry yourself to sleep every night for the shame and waste of it all. Again, this would be closer for myself, but not quite right. Is it about love? I'd say yes, for those who can access it, but what if you can't, or won't, or in any case haven't? Maybe this, the knowledge that when the call came, you answered. Ready or not, reconciled or at odds with the world, you answered when you told your then audience of Gamergators to go fuck themselves. Your channel, your truth. I don't think I ever told you just how much I admired that in you. Balls of effing steel, man. Balls of effing steel. Did I spare your blushes? Well, I really appreciate you saying that, Bruce. That means a lot to me. I think I don't know how many Gamergator types I ever had in my audience. I mean, I know that there were some, and I know that I did lose a certain percentage of my audience when I came out and said, hey, I support feminism, I support social justice, I support equality. I'm not going to pander to anti-feminists. I think anti-feminists are assholes. I think anti-SJWs and shitlords and trolls and people like that are assholes, and fuck them. I don't want their money. I don't want their viewership. I don't want their friendship. I don't need them. Fuck you. Goodbye. I did lose a certain percentage of my audience when I did that, and when other people started making like attack videos about me, there was a certain percent. And when I made it clear that I wasn't going, to play with people like that, even if it was someone who had been a friend of mine before, if they started making videos about how, oh, Steve's an asshole now because he's a feminist. Well, well, fuck you. We're not friends anymore. You can take whatever crossover audience we have and they can all fuck off right along with you. Like, I don't need you and I don't want you. I did lose a certain amount of the audience from that, but I have to tell you, and at the risk of undermining your wonderful, wonderful compliment that you just gave me, that, I mean, really, I can't tell you how much that means to me. And how much your support over the years has meant to me, because Bruce has been watching my videos for a very long time. It wasn't that, I mean, in terms of my subscriber base, it wasn't really all that much. That was back when I was still around 50,000 subscribers. And I don't think I ever dropped below 50,000. I think I might have gone from maybe 52 or 53,000 down lower, closer to 50,000. So I lost a few thousand subscribers probably over the course of several months. But as a percentage of the whole, it wasn't really that significant. Like, I don't know if it was even, I'm not, I don't know. I don't know if it was even like 1% of my total, of my total audience. Or 10, I don't know. I haven't, or 10%. I don't know. I haven't done the math, but it wasn't like it was nothing that I ever like worried about. It was nothing like I never like saw people, leaving, saw the subscriber count go down and thought, oh shit, I've fucked myself out of a YouTube channel. Like I never worried about that. I was never in any danger of that. The people that I lost were people that I could afford to lose and that I wanted to lose, that I never wanted in the first place. So, I mean, balls of effing steel, like, I really appreciate you saying that. I don't know how true that is, but I really appreciate you saying that. It's a lovely thing to say, and I'm glad that you feel that way about me, whether I deserve it or not. Next question is from Jin Hai. Steve Shives, the online creator world seems pretty toxic. Do you have any regrets about becoming a gigantic YouTube star who can't go out without a mask on? Kidding aside, it must take a thick skin or a lot of mental well-being to handle trolls and toxicity without engaging in mudslinging with the haters. Do you think you were equipped to handle that stuff before you went online, or have you learned to do it with your early experience? Anything you wish someone had told you before you started putting yourself out there? Frake Shives 2024. Speaking of which, I don't think that was planned unless Bruce and Jin were in cahoots with each other. I've for a very long time in my life, I've had the philosophy of, you know what, life's too short. And when it comes to engaging with people in real life or on the internet who are obviously acting in bad faith, who are just trying to start an argument with you for attention or to generate content out of it, or for some reason other than they want, to have some kind of intellectual exchange with you, life's just too short for that. And I've always thought that. I've thought that for as long as I've never, if, some asshole anti-feminist shithead, like, made a video about me and tried, why? Life's too short for that. I've got my own shit to do. Like, I don't, like, other people don't determine what the content of my channel is. I do. And I make videos about the stuff that I want to make videos about. And I never really felt any pressure to engage with people who were making, for a while there, it was like a little miniature cottage industry of people making response videos to me and taking everything I said out of context or putting the least charitable spin on everything, especially if I would make a video about feminism or social justice or, LGBTQ equality or any kind of political issue that touched on quote unquote SJW stuff. They would spin it out of proportion and to make it sound like, I was some kind of authoritarian dictator who wanted to take people's liberties away and wanted people to be thrown in prison for using the wrong pronouns on someone or whatever. And all I've ever said was, if you intentionally use the wrong pronouns for someone, then you're just an asshole and I don't want to be your friend. I don't think you should go to prison, but I think you're a piece of shit. And I'm not going to pretend that you're a respectable person and have a debate with you about something. Or, if you think that being a men's rights activist is like a respectable thing to be, well, then fuck you. You're not my friend. I don't consider you a serious person and I don't consider you someone worth talking to. And it doesn't take a lot of effort on my part to not talk to you. I just spend my time doing the other stuff that I would rather be doing anyway. So, I mean, a lot of it is just kind of automatic in my head. Like, it's not like, and I guess, I don't know, maybe part of it is my dad. I feel like I take after my dad a little bit in that way because he has a very sort of matter of fact, uncomplicated view of the world. And I think my view of the world is more complicated than his, but maybe my way of engaging with it is more simplistic, kind of like his is, where it's like, this isn't something that I think is worth my time. Forget it, So I guess in that way, maybe I'm, what do I wish someone had told me? I wish someone would have told me that no matter what you say, no matter how careful you are, and no matter how sincere you are, and no matter what your intentions are, and no matter how reasonable you are being, there will be people who will hate you and will try to destroy you, no, just for the sake of it, no matter what, like because they view you as a threat, or because they are so thin-skinned and defensive that they interpret what you're saying as like a personal insult to them or whatever. Like there will always be people who just hate you and want to get at you and want to distract you and tear you down and run you off and whatever. And there's no reasoning with them. Like the best thing to do is to just ignore them and to get on with whatever you were going to do anyway. And that's what I did. But I was a little surprised by how much hate there was over someone saying something utterly uncontroversial, like women's equality is something important. Of the two primary genders, women have it a lot worse on average than men. Right? Like that to me is not a controversial statement. That's just a fact, and people who fall outside of that gender binary have it even worse in many ways because they're completely erased. But like the fact women's that there is sexism and inequality in our society, and it disadvantages women primarily. Like, how is that a controversial statement? But to some people, that's like hate speech, right? I was a little taken aback by that. I was a little, racism is still a problem in the United States. It didn't go away when we elected one black president. Like that to me is an uncontroversial statement. Rape is prevalent in our society, and apologies for rape are prevalent in our society. I don't know how you could argue that. But people argue that we don't live in a society that diminishes the seriousness of sexual assault, even though both major party candidates in this election will be people who have been credibly accused of sexual assault. And yet there are still people who are going to pretend that it's not, that it's alarmism. It's ridiculous to even say that we live in a rape culture. So, but just the prevalence of and the ferocity and the volume of people who think that way. I was not prepared for that initially, so a warning about that might have been nice. But other than that, no, I think I probably would have done the same thing that I wound up doing. John Gingras, how do you feel about the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one? That famous Vulcan motto. It sounds great at first, sacrificing for the greater good and all, but there's a darker side too. It can lead to a tyranny of the majority over minorities. Thus, I blame the Vulcan influence for the plot of Star Trek Insurrection. Strip mining, or the technobabble equivalent of the Baku homeworld, could help many people throughout the Federation. There's some manifest destiny right there. Anyway, in the hopes of keeping it brief enough, I'll just ask your thoughts on what I've written. Thanks. Yeah, that's a good... Well, yeah, it's sort of like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. It's a really beautiful sentiment if it is a sentiment that is held by the few, right? If it's held by the many and it is taken as license to do whatever you need to do to the few to help the many, then yeah, it's horrible. Like it's the worst thing you could possibly think. So yeah, that's a good point. Obviously, that's not how Spock meant it. Spock meant it as, speaking about the greater good, about, just because it may cost you personally something, if it helps other people, then, maybe it's the noble thing to do that. But it, it was Spock's decision. When Spock goes into the engine room in Star Trek II, he's choosing to do that to save the ship. Captain Kirk is not saying, Spock, needs of the many, needs of the few, get down there, fix the ship. Thanks a lot, buddy. Like, he wasn't doing that. Spock was taking it upon himself to do that. If Kirk had forced Spock to do it against his will, that might be, we might look at that a little differently. So yeah, taking that philosophy as permission for the majority to exploit the minority for their own benefit, like that is not the way you want to take that motto at all. And yeah, maybe a misinterpretation of that could be blamed for the plot to steal the radiation from the Baku's planet in Insurrection. That's a good point. Joe McClory, happy May Day and International Workers' Day. I was going to ask another Biden question that may end up still on deck, sorry, but I figure with today being such an important day to organize labor, arguably more important than Labor Day, you were complaining about the protests by the people trying to open the states as it is really easy to notice them. But have you heard about the strikes that are happening, many of which today? Have you been following the other labor movements to try to get PPE or more reasonable sick policies during this pandemic and after? And if you have heard these things, how much did you find out from the news and how much because you follow politics or have supporters who do? Does it make you angry that the press is showing off the people trying to demand the service industry go back to work while ignoring the workers that are demanding to be safe while working? That is a great point. And to answer your question, I have found out almost everything that I've heard about it. I have found from people that I follow on Twitter, and you know, people who are involved in the labor movement or support the labor movement, or are people who are themselves on strike or standing in solidarity with people on strike. There's that. There's a couple of memes going around today saying, you know, make sure that you don't do business today with these companies, and it's like Amazon and Walmart and Target and a couple of other like big corporations, because there are currently workers at all those companies that are on strike and are on strike specifically for COVID-related things because they're protesting that are unsafe in this current environment. They're trying to improve conditions for workers like right now during this pandemic. And yeah, I have seen nothing about that on the news in the mainstream media. I've seen all that I've heard about it has been from people I follow on Twitter. And yeah, it is disappointing that you know, a bunch of right-wing assholes who are protesting to try and, you know, get restaurants and stores to open up again, or to you know, get the bars to open again, or, you know, reopen America in the middle of a pandemic, and, you know, storming the Michigan State House with guns to do it. Like, they are the major news story, but workers who are protesting for safety conditions, they're hardly ever mentioned or not mentioned at all. Yeah, you're right. It does piss me off. It's not. It seems like it should be the opposite, doesn't it? Like, we should mention the other thing, but we should focus on this and draw attention to this, because that you know, if they get what they want, that would have the most long-term benefit for people, wouldn't it? So yeah, it's a really good question and a really good point. John Brockman, you find yourself behind Rawls' veil of ignorance on the other side of the vast universe of Star Trek, knowing you'll far more likely find yourself a shit farmer under the heel of some rubber four-headed dictator rather than a wealthy vintner with an inexplicable British accent and the benign foolishness of the Federation. Do you step through the veil? Not when you put it that way. No, that there is sort of like there is a dark underbelly of the Star Trek universe. When we talk about the optimistic future of Star Trek, we have to sort of remind ourselves that we're talking about the future as experienced by people who live within Federation territory. Like, the future for Cardassians or Bajarans or you know, I mean, Christ, Romulans as of Star Trek Picard, where Romulans don't even have a homeworld anymore. They're basically the wandering dregs of the galaxy. Like, not to mention all the people that we never see who just live on shitty planets with shitty dictatorial governments, or like the weird little Twilight Zone planets where like kids are in charge or something, you know, like, yeah, it's a really dark, twisted universe in a lot of ways. Things seem really great in the Federation for the most part. But outside the Federation, it's kind of a shit show. So yeah, no, I don't think I would. I don't think I would. I would roll the dice that way. I think I'm doing okay here. I don't know if I want to take the chance that I'll end up, you know, like the aforementioned Gul Madred, starving on the streets of Lacat in Cardassia and having to eat like live bird eggs to survive. Like, no, I'll just stay here and keep doing YouTube videos. Thanks. Sean Hartley, hey Steve, hope you're well. Let's imagine you've just discovered how to create an AI so advanced it would be indistinguishable from other life, but in doing so, you have somehow also discovered that this sentient AI has the same capacity for good and for evil that humanity has. Do you still create the sentient AI knowing what it could unleash upon the world? Or do you not create it, and the world potentially misses out on wonders so amazing that they dwarf the wonders humanity could cover? What do you choose and why? Thanks. I mean, at first I thought this is a really tough question. And then I thought, dude, you don't even have kids. Like, I wouldn't even create a life in the traditional way because I'm unwilling to take responsibility for it. So why would I want to unleash an artificial intelligence that, yes, would have the potential to make the world a much better place, but could also turn and go all lore on us and create suffering never before imagined? I think I would have to say no. I think I would have to say I'm not going to potentially unleash that on humanity because I'm a wuss and I am not willing to take the responsibility. So sorry. And also, you're welcome. Next question is from Matthew Maeda. Hey, Steve, I was wondering about the El-Aurian species Guinan is a part of. It seems the writers of TNG kept her and her species open-ended, where there is a lot of mystery to them. What we have seen of Guinan beyond her ability to listen and give advice, but she had some extraordinary ability to recognize where her reality was altered. She felt it coming in yesterday's Enterprise. She acknowledged things had changed for her when no one else obviously noticed, even to the point of her knowing she wasn't supposed to have met Tasha Yar at all, and felt that she had died an empty death. The one thing that seems to have not even acknowledged much was her behavior towards Q. Watch Q Who and the interaction between the two. When she appears, Q gets immediately hostile to her, and she puts her hand up in some sort of defense. Q warns Picard about her and raises his hand as if to strike her, which again, she raises hers in some semblance of defense. When he talks to Picard, he never takes his eyes off of her, and when he speaks to her about humanity going much too fast and too far, he speaks to her like a near equal, as much as a Q would do. These nuanced behaviors tell me there is a level of respect he gives to her kind, that he doesn't take his eyes off her, and her defensive stance also suggests she could actually defend herself from a Q, as if she is as powerful as a Q. It is never addressed again, and the only other interaction in a later episode, they seem to snark at each other until she stabs his hand to prove his mortality. Do you think perhaps the writers wanted to give Guinan, and by extension her species, some powers beyond other species, beyond the rather longish lifespan? Outside of Guinan, Sauron in Star Trek Generations, and the El-Aurian Chris Sarandon played in DS9 didn't exhibit anything beyond the listening and influencing. Yeah, I think that's probably just an example of the writers early on in the series not quite having figured out where they wanted to go with that character or with that species. That's why they kept, I mean, the El-Aurians weren't even the name of that race until Generations. The term El-Aurian was never mentioned in Star Trek The Next Generation. Guinan, if she referred to her people collectively at all, she referred to them as just my people or a race of listeners. They weren't even established as having a name until Generations, when they were called El-Aurians. So I think that she was just supposed to be a mysterious character with a mysterious past, a mysterious history with the captain. It was all just mystery. And as they decided to build that out and establish some parts of it in a little bit more concrete ways, it didn't all mix with what they had done earlier when they weren't quite sure what to do. So I think it's a case of something like that. They just, they weren't quite sure what they were doing with Guinan at first in terms of her species and her abilities. And I know other people have suggested that Guinan's heightened perception of reality may be unique to her. It's a popular fan theory, and I think it may have even been the subject of one of the novels or a comic book series or something, that the reason Guinan has such a heightened sense of reality is because of her experience in the Nexus, and because a part of herself is still in the Nexus and therefore is able to perceive reality across all times and dimensions. And she is still faintly connected to that part of her that is still in the Nexus, and that's why she has this sixth sense about certain things. But that's never been established on screen. But that's something that people have speculated about, that maybe it's not an El-Aurian thing, it's specifically a Guinan thing because she was in the Nexus. Although Sauron was in the Nexus too, so you'd think he would have it as well, but we don't really see much of whether he has it or not. So who's to say? But yeah, I think it's probably just a case of the writers were making it up as they went along, and they were trying to say, oh, hey, I wonder what Guinan and Q would be like. And they just kind of wrote something, and it didn't turn out to be anything that they hung on to in the future. And finally, last question from Matthew Datcher. In April, Prime Video had 4K renders of classic James Bond films, from Dr. No to Die Another Day. I haven't watched those films since I was a teenager. Maybe my own views have changed, or maybe watching your videos have shifted me, but I couldn't get over the rampant and blatant misogyny in the films, particularly considering the real-life attitudes of Sean Connery. My younger self didn't even notice. Have there been any films about which you changed your attitudes so radically? Well, not in the sense that you're describing your attitudes changing toward James Bond. Although I guess if I had seen those movies as a kid, I probably would have had an experience similar to yours. But I just never really got into the Bond movies as a kid. I didn't really start watching them at all until I was an adult. So I mean, I sort of noticed the misogyny and all that stuff right away because I was already who I am when I watched them for the first time. But I remember there was a movie. There's this really awful movie called Boxing Helena, starring Julian Sands and Sherilyn Fenn, who are both fine actors in their own right. And it was directed by Jennifer Lynch, who is David Lynch's daughter, and has also become a very good director in her own right. But Boxing Helena was Jennifer Lynch's, I think it was her first feature film as a director. And it's a story about a guy who becomes obsessed with a beautiful neighbor, and then one night, the neighbor is in a really bad car accident outside his house, and instead of calling the ambulance and getting help for her, he brings her inside and basically takes her hostage, and he amputates her legs and won't let her leave the house. And then when she gets too belligerent with him, he cuts off her arms, and so she's like an arm and a leg amputee and trapped in his house. And it's just this really dark, like twisted kind of psychological thriller. And when I saw it for the first time as a teenager, I thought it was like fucking genius. Like, I thought it was so great. I thought it was the best movie I'd ever seen. And when I watched it years later as an adult, it's like laughably awful. It's so bad. It's over the top and overacted and over dramatic. Everything's just ratcheted up to 11, and it's so fucking trashy and and talk about problematic. Like, I mean, it's just awful. It's hilarious. Like, it's fun to watch as like a mystery science theater type of thing. Like, it's such a great movie to watch because it's so fucking bad. But I didn't see that as a kid. As a kid, I thought, holy shit, this is great. This is like genius. Watching it as an adult, I saw it with completely different eyes. And I thought, oh my God, how did I ever think this was like a good movie, like a seriously good movie? So there you go. That's a movie that I have definitely changed my mind about. All right, let's go to the live chat, because that was the last of the patron questions. And to anybody in the live chat who has been sitting on a question, let's get to it. Oh, I just saw a super chat here from John Burns. Thank you, John. It says, in early 2000, in response to The Governator, Arnie was a character on Conan and mentioned the voters love the Nazi and they love the groping. Is the 2020 the election of the Nazi and the groping? It's so weird that you bring that up, because I watched that old Conan clip just like a couple months ago. It hasn't been that long. I watched it relatively recently, and yeah. I mean, and I remember that. Oh, the voters, they love the Nazi, they love the groping. It's okay, Conan. They're going to love the Governator. Like, I watched that just recently, and it probably is. I think it probably is. It's the It's the election of the groping and the Nazi. Although the last one was too, really, because Trump was, Anyway, let me see. Did I miss any other super chats? Let me check. Nope, John was the first one. Good. Oh, there's another one. Another one just came in. Also from John, thank you again. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one is aligned by Spock. When he is Spock again, he asks, why did you do this? Kirk's response, that's the point of those movies. Yes, exactly. Absolutely. He says that because the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the few or the many. Yeah. But again, is a choice that you as an individual make. He's telling, and he's also, I think he's telling Spock, some things can't be explained through logic. I helped you because you're my friend. And it doesn't matter if it was the many risking our lives for the one. You were our friend and we loved you, and that's why we chose to risk our lives for you. And it's not logical. It's friendship, it's emotion, it's love, and you can't explain that logically. Which is a lesson that Spock actually takes to heart in a way, because in Star Trek VI, he has that scene with Valeris where they're talking in his quarters and she says something, she's trying to make a point. And she says, but logic dictates. And Spock actually cuts her off and he says, logic, logic, logic. Logic, Valeris, is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. So he takes that to heart. Greyhound 5 Media, I feel the same way about American Beauty. I kind of do as well, actually. I never thought American Beauty was like a great movie, but I never thought it should have won Best Picture, because 1999 was such a great year for movies, and I didn't think American Beauty was even in my top 10 of movies that year. But I thought it was a good movie, and then I saw it again like as a little bit later as a slightly older person, and I thought, wow, this really isn't that great of a movie, is it? I mean, I still don't think it's like awful. I don't think it's a really, really bad movie, but it's not like a great movie at all. I'm just like, oh, okay, I guess people just really wanted to see Kevin Spacey creep on a young girl that year. It doesn't look so great in hindsight. Tom McDonald says, hey, I remember now. I was channeling Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Now, I do care for you in a manly way, but Lizzie loves you to the breadth and depth and height her soul can reach. I figured that. I always knew that, I knew Liz Browning had kind of a thing for me, even though our lives didn't intersect like at all. Like the Venn diagram of her lifespan and mine is two completely separate circles. Okay. But I kind of thought, despite that, I kind of thought she was sort of into me at first. I read that poem and I thought, come on, Liz. So yeah. Der Alta Trekkie says, gotta say, if Gul Madrid has to eat live bird eggs, aren't raw Tuspa eggs a delicacy on Cardassian? Yeah, that's what I meant. They're not like bird eggs. Yeah, Taspa, live Taspa. That's what I was going for. You can't meet me halfway at all, can you? You know what I'm getting at, but you just can't let me have it. You have to, I do that to my wife and she hates it. And now I see why. Because you know what I meant. You know what I meant. 255 AD says, question, do you think Eli's frustration is because it feels like they shouldn't have to sweet talk people who are on the fence about something like this? Yes. In this particular situation where the alternative is 4 more years of Trump and Trump appointing Supreme Court justices and all of that, yes. The frustration I do think is, why do we have to sweet talk you? Why is it not immediately obvious what's at stake, and why the best option of the admittedly shitty options available is for you to hold your nose and vote for Biden? I know that is the source of frustration for me. And I imagine it's the source of frustration for Eli too. Andrew Michael says, so I'm writing a fan fiction based on Voyager because it's a Romulan ship chasing a little Federation ship. You think that would make Voyager more appealing to Your Majesty? Maybe. Sure. I mean, Voyager's, the premise that Voyager had would have made Voyager more interesting to me if they had just paid more attention to it. But yeah, a Romulan ship chasing Voyager. Yeah. That could be interesting. I mean, it just it depends on what you do with it. Like, Voyager's starting premise was a good one. It's just they didn't go anywhere with it. So your premise could be a good one too. It depends on what your story is. Oh, Leto, you don't have to apologize for not liking Eli. That's okay. I don't hold it against you. I'm quite positive he is not everybody's cup of tea, for sure, in many different ways. Der Alta Trekkie, wouldn't the Nexus give us the possibility of giving us Bill Shatner Kirk again? I mean, Guinan's Nexus self is still in the Nexus. Why not Jim? Yeah, I'm sure that's a way they could go if they wanted to bring him back, for sure. David Colby, at this point, Biden being a rapist or not matters slightly less to me than the absolutely disgusting way a bunch of centrist pundits have reacted to the accusation. Yeah, I agree. They've reacted to it worse than Biden himself has, oddly enough. I mean, the worst thing that Biden did was he was silent on it for so long. He did not address it for a very long time. And he came out today and he denied it, which we all knew that he would. And that's, if you believe the accusation, then it's kind of like, oh God, he denied it. Of course he did. But then he also said, he pointedly did not take it as an opportunity to cast doubt on people who come forward with rape allegations in general. And he also said, investigate it, look through the documents, look through the National Archives, find any evidence of any complaints against me and make them public, right? So that was a pretty good reaction, right? And a lot of the pundits who are sort of carrying water for Biden are going a lot further than that and saying, oh, look at all the holes in her story. Here's all the reasons you shouldn't believe her. Here's why it doesn't matter if it's true anyway. And yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of the reaction from people who support Biden and really are trying their damnedest to just make this go away as quickly as possible have been really, really gross. Really, really gross. Some Random Geek says, since the mainstream media is not covering the workers' movement, are you more inclined to say that America is a center-right country? No, when I say America is a center-right or center-left country, I mean, like, I'm talking in terms of the political beliefs of the people who live here, not necessarily in terms of the priorities of the media or things like that. I mean, if you could somehow poll the sincere innermost opinions of most people in the country, I think it would be closer to center left than center right. That's what I'm talking about. Another super chat from John Burns. Thank you again. American Beauty Oscar winner. I didn't see it, but a buddy of mine mentioned dating many women who were like the Mina Savari character, the one from the poster, and so he understood her character. Okay. I don't even really remember all that much about her character, to be honest. I don't know if her character was necessarily all that well served in the movie. I remember Jane. I remember the Thora Birch character being a lot more explored, but Mina Savari's character, I don't remember a whole lot about her. David Colby, Voyager, but good, is so easy to write. It's like easy mode because Voyager is an incredibly good premise let down by incompetent and lazy writers. Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. Some Random Geek says, what about those marginalized folks like our disabled comrade friend Joanna Roberts who will not see any material improve in their lives with Biden in the White House versus Trump? Well, then you have to look at who would you rather have appointing Supreme Court justices for the next 4 years? Whose policies do you think would be better for people in your situation? If a disabled person honestly thinks that the policies of the Democratic Party would not be better than the policies of the Republican Party, I just don't see that argument. I see the argument that they don't go far enough. Absolutely. I see the argument that the Democratic Party needs to be a hell of a lot better on those issues. Absolutely. But to say that they are not preferable to the Republican Party, I just don't get that. I really don't get that argument. So, I mean, to demand more, absolutely. To demand better, absolutely. But to say, well, I don't think it would be any different under Trump or Biden. I don't see that argument. Joe McClory says, do you think that Biden could have been so entitled to female attention back then that he could have done the thing she claims and honestly forgot it happened? Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think that's possible. Absolutely. Sure. I have to say, I also think it's possible that he did it and he remembers full well that he did it and he's just lying. I think that's possible too. Some Random Geek said, why do some folks always go to what about the terrible things Stalin has done when someone like me who is an anarchist and a socialist? Yeah, I want what Dana said in her reply, because they're ignorant. because I guess they assume that to be a socialist means that you must also be a Stalinist or approve of Stalin's policies or whatever. I think it's just ignorance. And Leto, yeah, I'm sure you're right. Says I don't get it because I'm not disabled. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I'm completely sure that that's the case, and I acknowledge that. David Colby says, here's an argument I've seen for not voting for Democrats. If we want them to be more progressive but vote for them anyway, then why would they ever change? Yeah, but the thing is that Democrats have lost elections before, and that has not made them more progressive. If anything, the electoral success that Republicans have had has not taught Democrats the lesson of, okay, we need to be more progressive. It's made them think we need to be more like Republicans. So I don't think the Democratic Party is ever going to learn that lesson unless we change it from the inside, right? The idea of, well, if we keep voting for them, they'll never change. Well, that may not be a good strategy for changing them anyway. Michael Ben-Huri says, have I ever read Thomas Frank's Listen Liberal? No, I have not. Yannick Muller says, hey, Steve, how much did you have to change this season's Steve and Stuffy storyline to comment on the coronavirus situation? I have not had to change the larger storyline at all, but the stories of particular episodes have been adjusted. I mean, obviously, before the coronavirus was a thing, none of the episodes were going to talk about it at all. And so far, every episode has featured it in some way. It just so happens that my concepts for episodes were flexible enough that I could work the COVID-19 pandemic in without having to change too much. So individual episodes have changed a little bit. And particular jokes or particular lines have been in there. And I've had to make allowances for things. Like I had to put some stuff into the episode where me and Toby Benson are on stakeout. Like that was an idea that I had months and months and months and months ago. And I had to change it enough so that it could take place in a coronavirus world, and the idea of them going on stakeout because they were looking for someone who was hoarding supplies or hoarding food as a result of the COVID-19 epidemic or was, doing it to try and profit from it. Like that was obviously all stuff that I added. But the general story of that episode was always going to be Steve and Toby Benson on a stakeout and Steve getting on Toby Benson's nerves. So I've had to make allowances, but I haven't had to make like wholesale changes. The ideas are flexible enough, I think. Der Alte Trekkie says, today, apparently the crew of a German satire magazine was attacked and 4 journalists were put in hospital. Why do people have to be assholes and attack journalists? I mean, you're right. But I don't know how it is in Germany. And in this country, it's because the president encourages them to view journalists as enemies of the people. I mean, that's not 100% to blame, but it is certainly a contributing factor. The disparaging and vilification of journalists in general it contributes to that a lot. $255 AD, just so you know, Mare Zieler is a socialist alien composer with 3 legs. Good to know. David Colby says, part of me wonders if maybe some of the Democrats aren't interested in winning elections. Controlled opposition, anyone? I don't know, maybe. A little conspiratorial. Some random geek says, you said before, can't we try reform? When have we not tried reform? Haven't we been doing reform for the last 40 years or longer? Has it worked? Sometimes. Yes, it has. It has worked. At least it has not worked in the sense that it has fixed the problem forever, but it has certainly made things better. I would argue that Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty policies were definitely working until they were completely abandoned and reversed and trashed by the Republicans in the 80s. Yeah. I think there's a lot of evidence that reform can improve things, can help, can make a difference. It's just you have to stick to it, and you have to stop electing people that are determined to undermine it. 1234 Tomb says, between Captains Kirk and Picard, Jack Bauer or Rick Grimes, who would you say is the stronger leader? Probably Picard. It's either Kirk or Picard, because Kirk and Picard both led very large groups of people who would do pretty much anything they wanted. And I think between the two, I would have to go with Picard. Dana says, how many times should leftists be expected to hold their nose and vote for a centrist candidate who loses to a right-wing nut job before it's acceptable to try a different strategy? Well, I guess it depends on what the strategy is. I mean, look, you're going to have when the situation is it's election day and there are two probable outcomes and that's it. You're going to have a really hard time selling me on the acceptability of not voting for the lesser of two evils. I mean, if you want, if you think that pursuing some kind of political revolution is the way to go, is what we have to do, then go for it. But while you're working to build your revolution, go to the polls on election day and vote for the lesser of two evils. Vote as a form of harm reduction. Vote for the candidate who will be the least destructive, who will be the most open to reason and the most likely, even if they're still not very likely, the most likely to support more progressive legislation, more progressive reforms. Like it's a matter of what you have two options. One of the two is going to happen. So you need to choose the acceptable one, because, and I just froze. So I think I'm probably out of sync really bad. So I'm gonna, I'm gonna. But if we get to November and those are still the two options, I have a hard time accepting that it's acceptable, to not vote for the lesser of two evils, to not try and stop Donald Trump in this case from becoming president, even if it means voting for someone who is far, far, far from your first choice. Duralta Trekkie says, what happened to Bernie Sanders? He lost. Leto Anner says the same thing. He lost. Unfortunately, he lost quite emphatically again for the second election cycle in a row. He lost quite emphatically. 255 AD says, when I asked him about it, Thomas Smith said he is not willing to give them moral license not to vote out Trump just because of their personal trauma. Thoughts? In terms of people who have experienced sexual assault, is that what you're talking about? I'm not going to. It's like I've said before. It's not my place to tell people who can't vote for Biden for that reason to say that they're wrong or to try and push them into it. Like it's gross and it's not my place. If you're a sexual assault survivor and you say I can't vote for Joe Biden for that reason, I see that I have no option but to respect that. Especially since I have never had that experience myself. It's very, very wrong to me for me to say to someone who is a sexual assault survivor to say, sorry, I think I have made the decision as someone who has never had your trauma. I have decided that you should overlook that trauma. You should get past that and you should vote for this guy who has inflicted that kind of harm on someone else. Like I can't do that. Another super chat from John Burns. Why are you ignoring my favorite Trek moments? I'm not meaning to. I apologize. I don't always see everything that people say in the chat, so I'm not ignoring it on purpose. And also from Michael Ben Hurry, who says it's been fun, Steve. It's been fun, Steve. Go vegan. Okay, cool. Thank you. Glad you could be here, and thank you for the super chat. Deralta Trekkie says, "Buddy had good ideas. Why did he lose? Was the majority of the people too stupid to notice that he had good ideas?" Well, I mean, I thought Elizabeth Warren had good ideas too, and she lost even worse than Sanders did. So, I think it's. I think just as I don't think that the country is as conservative as some random geek might think. He says it's more center right. It's not nearly as progressive as I would wish it to be. And I think a lot of people, socialism is still a scare word to a lot of people, unfortunately. And when a lot of people don't seem to see the value or the necessity of some of the policies and programs that Sanders supports. And I think, a lot of people just didn't think he did have good ideas. I disagree. And I wish more people thought that his ideas were good. I wish he had won the election. I wish Warren had won the election, but that didn't happen. 255 AD. Oh, a super chat from Rowan Foster. You are a good person, and I'm glad you're. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that. And thank you for the super chat. David Colby says, "Oh, season 5 of She-Ra trailer dropped. I'm a ball of complete and total tension and excitement. Man, it would suck to have a follow-up. To have to follow this up with some He-Man. Talk about pressure. Yeah, the trailer was pretty cool. I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it." Leto says, "In France, we thought the lesser of two evils was Macron. I'm not so sure about that anymore. I'm so sorry y'all are in that position." Me too. Thank you. And I'm sorry you're in you all in France are in the position you're in. 255 AD says, "Thomas thinks pragmatism demands that of him." Well, I do not think that pragmatism demands that of me. Like I have no desire to say that to a person who refuses to vote for Biden for that reason, and I don't think I'm capable of saying. I just don't. I can't. I do not feel that pragmatism demands that of me. Eddie Stone, "Hey Steve, something I've noticed you often do is jokingly talk down your less prepared Trek videos. Frankly, I'd watch you talk Trek scripted or not for hours, and have done." Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad you think so. I mean, the not actually Trek videos usually turn out pretty good, but I mean, when you script a video, you can actually write it with a thesis, with a point to make, have an arc and have some closure. And I find those videos are a lot more satisfying to me creatively. But I'm glad that people like the videos where I just sit down in front of the camera with maybe some bullet points or just some ideas in my head and just ramble about Star Trek for half an hour. That I'm really glad that people like that, because those videos sure are a lot easier to make. Deralta Trekkie says, "So apparently with Detmer, we have a German character in Discovery. She's from Dusseldorf. What do you think? How should it be addressed in the show? Should it be addressed?" Well, yeah, I think it would be neat if it was at least mentioned. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can find to work it in. It doesn't necessarily have to be a staple of her character, but it would be nice to have it mentioned, because those are the things, those little details are what allow characters to feel real. The fact that Captain Kirk is from Iowa is not a major part of his character, but the fact that we know that makes him seem more real. It makes him seem more complete, more whole. So if Detmer being from Dusseldorf is worked into an actual episode, so it's mentioned on screen, and we know that for a fact about her character, that makes her seem like more of a real person, because real people are from somewhere, right? And so, yeah, I think it should definitely be mentioned at some point. Yeah, absolutely. 1, 2, 3, 4, Tom H. Tom H. Yeah, that's it. Says, "Have you ever worked in construction?" No, I haven't. Do I seem like I have? Physically, I'm completely worthless. I just want you to know, like I have virtually nothing to contribute physically. So no, I have not. I've never worked construction. Hi, Christy. Robert Mills says two things. First, it was hard to riff on the Noble Savage. Was it hard to riff on the Noble Savage episode in the Ensign's log? Second, TCM is having Close Encounter and It Came from Outer Space tonight. Oh, that's cool. Those are both really good movies. No, actually, I'm glad you brought this up because I wanted to mention this. I thought our new episode of the Ensign's log is one of our best episodes we've ever done. And it's because it was rooted in such a problematic episode of classic Trek. Paradise Syndrome is one of the most problematic episodes of classic Trek because it is all about that noble savage trope. It is all about cultural appropriation, even though people didn't call it that at the time that the episode was produced. So we got to make fun of that and comment on that and make my character look foolish and look silly and wrong for embracing that and doing that and hopefully demonstrate why that's bad. You know, why what the episode does, why what Kirk does in the episode is bad, and why cultural appropriation in general is not a good thing, without being too didactic about it and hopefully in a way that was funny. I mean, it's toot my own horn, but I thought it was funny when I listened to the finished episode. So no, it was easy. And the beautiful part about it was we didn't sit down and plan any of that. I think some of that Jason had in his head when we went into it, but it's not like Jason and I sat down before we started that recording and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make it about making fun of cultural appropriation. You know, all he said was, okay, Steve, your character has kind of gone native. And, you know, you are wearing native clothing and I just sort of took that and ran with that and played that the way I thought my character would play it and, you know, had his attitude be the way I thought his attitude would be. And Jason playing the part of Salish was sort of, you know, I love the way he was playing that character as like, you know, just, he did not give a fuck about any of my excuses. He did not give a fuck about any of my explanations. He found me absolutely revolting and insulting and irritating and condescending. And I thought it was one of our best episodes. $55AD says, is it bad that I do this to you and other left-wing people, i.e. this person you're friendly with said something you disagree with? What do you think? No, I mean, not necessarily, no. I mean, if you're just curious about what I think, because I mean, I don't feel like you're saying it to like try to trap me or try to make me uncomfortable. And I'm comfortable giving my opinion about stuff. And if someone I like said something I disagree with or something that I don't think they should have said, like I'm comfortable saying that. And hopefully I'm able to say it in a way that, you know, if they saw me say it, they wouldn't think that I hated them all of a sudden or whatever. So, you know. $55AD also said Kirk is from Iowa because the standard American accent all actors had to use in the 60s is based on the Iowa accent. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Joe McClory says, did you consider doing an Ensign's log joke in either of the overlooked Star Trek character episodes? No, I never thought about doing that. No. Lato says, toot my own horn is my favorite American expression. It's one of my favorites too, actually. Duralte Trekkie says, when I was a teenager, I watched the old Winnetou movies. I liked them. Then I read the books, and I cannot help but think this character is a damn Mary Sue. I'm not familiar with those. Oh, so I don't know. Oh, David Colby, this is a great one. Would you rather be the leaper or the hologram? If God forbid you were accidentally inside of the acceleration chamber and launched backwards in time in Project Quantum Leap. I would rather be the hologram. I would love to be Al. Al is the guy to be in Quantum Leap because you get to have the adventure with Sam, but you don't have any of the pressure. In a heartbeat, I would be the hologram. I would love to be Al in Quantum Leap for sure. 255AD says, as a vegan, how do you feel about testing COVID vaccines on monkeys? I'm not a big fan of it. I'm not a big fan of animal testing in general. Whether I was a vegetarian or not, I wouldn't. And technically, I am a vegetarian, not a vegan. But I'm not. I don't I don't like animal testing in general. I mean, with something like testing a vaccine, I mean, I guess you could make the argument that it's better to try an untried vaccine on a monkey than on a human, but I mean that's kind of a squishy area. Like I'm not in favor of animal testing, period, and it really has nothing to do with. I guess it's a little bit related to the moral aspect of my vegetarianism, sure. I'm not. No, I don't feel good about it. Like even if I have to admit that it may be necessary, like I don't feel good about it. Dana, yes, I am a very good tree climber, and Dana knows that I'm a good tree climber because I have sent her, I have sent her pictures of me up in the tree. I have been like hanging from the branch and saying, "Oh, let me text a picture to Dana." And if I fall and die, at least I was doing a good thing while I was, yes, I think I am a very good tree. I'll toot my own horn about this. I'm usually modest about the YouTube thing and all that shit. I'm a really goddamn good tree climber. I climbed a tree the other day and I climbed the shit out of that tree too. Okay. That tree didn't know what the fuck hit it. I climbed all the way up to the fucking top of that tree. It didn't even know what the fuck was happening. I was up and down before it even knew. I'm not fucking good of a tree climber. God damn it. Fucking don't anybody ever try to fuck with me on climbing trees. Because that'll be it. Some random geek says, when will America collectively move their asses and riot in the streets to make the elected officials abolish the electoral college and fix our electoral system? Don't don't hold your breath waiting for it to happen. Is Dean Stockwell in Battlestar Galactica? Leto, I didn't know that. Derogatory Trekkie says, aren't you afraid of wasps, bees, hornets while climbing in trees? A little bit, yeah. I have had, there was a big old tree in my backyard that was the first tree that I ever like really, really loved to climb. And it had a big hornet's nest in it one year. And I couldn't climb it because of that. But yeah, when I climb a tree that I haven't climbed before, I am very careful about that. And there have been a couple trees in the area that I go to climb where I've only gotten up so far. And then I noticed there was a nest above my head and I came back down because I didn't want to disturb whatever was there. I haven't run into any bees yet, but I have run into birds' nests and possibly squirrels' nests. And I take pains to not disturb them if I see them. Actually, it's funny that you mentioned bees and wasps and stuff because there's going to be a tree climbing joke in next week's Steve and Stuffy video. I actually went 2 days ago when I was climbing a tree that I was mentioning before. I went and climbed a tree and I recorded some video while I was climbing the tree that it's going to be part of next week's Steve and Stuffy episode. And there's a joke in there about how there's a bee's nest in the tree and I'm worried about it. So it's weird that you mentioned that, but yes. Oh, he's a Cylon in Battlestar Galactica. That's cool. Spoilers. Jesus. Evan B says, Steve, what are your thoughts on the prophets in DS9? There's one episode where instead they talk about a caste system and why it's bad. They just say, well, let's just ask the prophets. Yeah, I mean, the prophets are interesting because they are they are real. They're not like the gods of earthly religions. Like they're legitimately like demonstrably real. So they're not quite the same as the gods that people worship here on earth in real life religions. It's not necessarily an article of faith, but it's an article of faith as to whether or not you think the prophets are to be listened to. You know, like being a member of the Bajaran religion means that you not only believe that the prophets exist, but that you believe that their teachings ought to guide your life. And that was one example where the wisdom of the prophets, being interpreted as we should have a caste system turned out to not be something that modern Bajor should be following. Lord Toast says, who's the better tree climber, Kirk or Picard? I have to believe it's probably Kirk. Because we see a little bit, Picard says he likes to climb in like one episode of TNG, but in Star Trek V, we see Kirk like halfway the fuck up El Capitan in Yosemite. So I feel like Kirk is the better climber. 255 AD. How would you vote if Matt Dillahunty was the Democratic nominee? Boy, you're just twisting the knife, aren't you? I would hold my nose and vote for Dillahunty, and I would not be happy about it. But if it was Dillahunty versus a typical Republican, I feel like as much as I think he's an asshole, I think he would do a better job than a Republican. So I would have to hold my nose and vote for him. Yeah. John Burns, another super chat. Thank you. And it says, Picard with DNA tests. How does a Romulan get as much influence in Trump-like Federation without being noticed? Racists are dumb, but that dumb? I guess, well, there's ways of disguising DNA too, though, in Star Trek. I mean, it's Star Trek. There's a way around anything. Like, and Commodore O was said to be half Romulan, right? So presumably she's also half Vulcan. So maybe there's some way that she could get in there somehow. I don't know. It's Star Trek. And whatever the plot needs to happen is what happens. Yes, some random geek. There is a little bit of there is a reference. Of course, there is to the Wicker Man. Yeah, I do. There is a not the bees line in what I recorded. So look for that. Mike Audette says, would you agree that Loxana Troi is the Jar Jar Binks of Star Trek? I would agree, but a lot of people would not. A lot of people really like Loxana, so I have decided, I have tempered my extremely negative opinions about Loxana Troi out of respect for some of my fellow fans who really, really like her and who relate to her in a very personal way. But no, to me, Loxana is the Jar Jar. Dana says, who's your favorite character in the new She-Ra? Glimmer. And I don't even have to think about it. Glimmer is my favorite character. I love Glimmer. I love Glimmer so much. Yeah. Glimmer is my favorite character in the new one, for sure. I'm one of those assholes that's like, well, I really like all the characters. Like I do. I think Adora is a great character. I think Shadow Weaver has become a really interesting character. I think Catra is great. Like I like all of the characters, but Glimmer is Swiftwind. The new version of Swiftwind is hilarious. I love Swiftwind, but Glimmer's my favorite by far. It's not even close. Yeah, Seal 0626. You would think that they would be genetically identical. I mean, they didn't split that long ago that you would think there would be like radical genetic differences between them, and they obviously still look very similar. So you would think they'd be pretty close, but yeah. Pancake says Loxana is better on DS9 than TNG. Yeah, I think, yes, she is. But not by much. No, not by much. Yeah, Swiftwind is an anarchist, isn't he? In the new She-Ra, some random geek. Yes, he is. David Colby says, by the way, if Catra dies, I'm going to literally be inconsolable. I will sob into my pillow for hours and hours. Now, that is a good show. That is a good show. When you can honestly say that about a character, that if a character that you like dies, you will sob into your pillow. That's it. Oh, I wish someday to create something that people would feel that way about. Where if I killed off a character or I did anything that evoked that kind of an emotional reaction. Ooh, yeah. Okay, last question, and then I'm going to start wrapping up because we've been going for almost 2 hours now. 255 AD says, question, is the Karen meme misogynist? No. No, it is not. It may have been used in a misogynistic way by some people, maybe, but do I think it is misogynist, generally speaking? No, I don't think it's misogynist at all. No. And most of the people saying it's misogynist seem to be people who just don't like being called a Karen. So they say, oh, that's misogynist. I don't think it is. All right. So I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you all so much for being with me. I just want to say once again, if I missed your question or you said something in the chat that I didn't respond to, I am very sorry that I missed it. It was not intentional. The chat goes by really fast sometimes, and I just don't see everything. So if you asked a question in the live chat and I missed it, I apologize. Nothing personal. Hope we can still be friends. I want to remind everybody before I go of the charity links down below in the description. Help out some of our friends that need a helping hand, and if you can't afford to help them financially, maybe consider sharing the links of some of their fundraisers on your social media, because it would really help out to spread the word. Okay. Dana snuck a question in here. Can you think of anyone who, as the Dem nominee, would result in you voting for Trump? No, I can't think of anybody. Oh, God, and a super chat from John Burns. I say last question, and you keep asking questions. Okay, so I answered Dana's question. John Burns says, in your next Quantum Trek AI's advising Sam, who's Al advising Sam, who's all Al? When am I going to leap? I've made peace between my character and all the other ones with, well, maybe he's such a douche. I don't even know what that means. In your next Quantum Leap, in your next Quantum Trek, Al's advising Sam, who's all Al? When am I going to leap? I've made peace between my character and all the other ones with, well, maybe he's such a douche. Okay, yeah, okay, cool. I think I get it. But anyway, thank you for the super chat. Thank you, Christy, for being here. Sorry that we started without you. Now then, in addition to the links down below, the charity links, I also want to remind you that I co-host a couple of awesome podcasts with the great Jason Harding, also known as the funny one who does all the work. You can listen to them on the LetMeListenPodcast.com website. You can also listen to them on SoundCloud or subscribe via RSS using your favorite podcast app. All those links are also in the description. And the podcasts that I co-host are Late Seating, the movie review podcast, and the Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast. There's a new episode of the Ensign's Log up today. I said earlier in the show in response to a question, I think it's one of our best episodes ever. It's hilarious. It is based on a very problematic original Trek episode. It's our way of sort of satirizing cultural appropriation and making fun of classic Star Trek in the way that we like to do, and also exploring our own characters on the show in a really fun and satisfying way. So I really, really liked it. Sorry, Dana, I just really like Glimmer. I love, you know what? Because Glimmer is the one that I would love to be like my friend, and I would want to be Glimmer's friend. How about that? Like, sorry, I didn't realize you were asking me for like an essay. Like you want me to write like a 5-paragraph essay on why Glimmer is my favorite character, because she's awesome and she has a great character arc, and I relate to her insecurity and her journey to sort of discover her power and claim her power. I just think Glimmer is great, and I just want to give Glimmer a hug, and I want Glimmer to be my friend. And also my Patreon, patreon.com/Steve Shives, if you want to support what I do here on this YouTube channel. And also if you want to submit questions ahead of time, knowing that I will answer them, guaranteed. You're kind of taking your life into your own hands here when you leave a question in the live chat, because I may not see it. You may not get your question answered. But if you are a patron, patrons of all levels from $1 a month on up to however much, We'll be able to submit questions ahead of time, and I will answer patron questions at the beginning of every episode of Ask Away. So there you go, patreon.com/Steve Shives if you want to become a patron. Patronage of any amount is greatly appreciated, and I could not do this without my wonderful patrons. So that's it, everybody. Thank you all so much. This was a fun show. I'm so glad to have everybody along and watching and commenting and asking questions. This is one of the highlights of my YouTube job now, doing this show and getting to talk to all of you. So thank you all so very much for being with me. Take care of yourselves. Watch after your physical and your mental and emotional health. Wash your hands. Wear protective equipment if you have to and if you can, and just watch out for yourselves and watch out for each other. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks to do this all over again. Have a good weekend. Take care, everybody.